Hey guys, welcome to the Hoop Hour. This is a podcast based on, as you can see from the title, hoops. It is going to be a probably weekly podcast that I try and do. I'll sometimes bring guests on, but for most of them, probably going to be solo. We're going to talk about NBA, NBA draft, the Nuggets probably a good amount because I'm a Nuggets fan, and other just hoop stuff, or if I feel like talking about other things, probably that as well. As you can see from the title, I'll try and make it around an hour, but we'll see if that takes. If it doesn't, then probably around 45 minutes. Sometimes it might run longer. But yeah, before we get into it, please like, subscribe, all that jazz. It helps a lot. And I have been struggling in the algorithm a little bit lately, so I'd just like to, get that going again. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's talk briefly about the NBA Finals so far and what happened. Last night or day before. Either way, this was a underwhelming game one. I was hoping for a close final series, and so far that has eluded us all. And I think most people were thinking that this series was going to be a good one. And obviously, it's just one game, right? This is all overreactions. Realistically speaking, both teams are going to go back, look at what happened, make adjustments. It's a 7-game series, and Dallas is bound to win one of them. Even if Boston wins on Monday, there's still going to be, good takeaways for the Mavs, and I expect it to be closer than game one. But the Celtics shellacked them. They belt to ass, had them the entire game, just entirely was Boston focused, really. And I don't think that Boston had a unrealistic performance for them. By that I mean, I don't think they had too much of an outlier shooting variance game. They did make a lot of their threes, and it did feel like they were making a hell of a lot of them, but also that had to do with Dallas not shooting as well as they have been the rest of the playoffs. Kyrie Irving sucking. I think he shot 6 of 19. Luka Doncic was like the only competent Dallas Maverick on offense for the most part. Josh Green had this crazy poster attempt on Kristaps that just got absolutely rejected. The Celtics shut him down a lot, and that is a large part of why the Mavs didn't even score 100. And Jason Tatum played well. Jaylen Brown played really well. Porzingis was modern Dirk Nowitzki. He couldn't miss, even when he was doing the dumb thing that Kristaps does, where he has a smaller guy on him. He's facing up. He shoots over them. It just was because it didn't matter. It went in. And sometimes it does matter if Kristaps shoots over a smaller guy, because sometimes he misses. But yesterday, game one, it didn't matter because he scored regardless. And he had 2 deep threes that he made. He shot 2 of 4 from 3. I remember that stat. And the misses were fine. They were in rhythm. But the 2 he made were from beyond the hash mark. It was incredible, the shooting performance that he put on. Jaylen Brown was getting to the rim with pretty much kind of whenever he wanted to. He had an insane poster. He was the best player for the Celtics, I'd say, outside of Kristaps probably. But he was incredible. He's been incredible the entire postseason. Jason Kidd said he was the best player on the Celtics. That's absolutely just mind games. He's absolutely just trying to get into the head of Tatum, of Boston, trying to lure Tatum into taking a lot of dumb shots. Because until the game was firmly put away in the fourth quarter, because they did kind of slip up a little bit. The lead got down from 29 to, I believe, 8. But they took a timeout, came back out, and actually held on to a lead for once, which is not something the Celtics often do. If the Celtics kind of crumble, right, they blow a 20-point lead, they blow a 30-point lead, they give that lead up all the way. Whether they win the game or not, typically it gets entirely just eradicated. But they held on. They got the lead back up to 20 for the rest of the game, more or less, after a run. And that was kind of that. And Tatum, for most of that game, was shooting smart shots. He didn't take too many of the sidestep threes, didn't take too many of the Kobe fadeaways that he likes to take. He was a very smart, methodical, well-thought-out player in Game 1. And he had a lot of good passing. I know he turned the ball over a good amount, but you could tell that he was kind of locked in. He was going to play well. He did play well. He was great on defense. He was great on offense. And the Celtics just showed out. And I think that this has more to do with the Celtics being very, very good than it does the Mavericks being bad. Albeit, the Mavericks did not shoot great. They shot, I think, 27% from three, if I remember. And P.J. Washington didn't make his threes, and that's been a theme for them this postseason, at least since the Thunder series. In the Thunder series, he shot very well. In the Wolves series, he did not shoot well at all. I think it was 24% on the series, something like that. It was either high 20s or low 30s. Either way, not a good series on that front from him, but Derrick Jones Jr. was shooting very well that series, so it didn't exactly matter. But Derrick Jones Jr. shot 1 of 2 in Game 1, and while that's 50%, that's very low volume, so it doesn't really matter. They weren't treating Derrick Jones Jr. as a floor spacer. P.J. Washington shot poorly, and if he's going to be shooting poorly, if Kyrie is going to be shooting poorly, Josh Green is going to be shooting 1 of 4 from the 3, 0 of 3 from within the arc. At a certain point, Luka can't do it all by himself, and the Celtics have arguably 5 of the top 7 players in this series. I'd argue, the Mavs have Kyrie and Luka, but the Celtics' entire starting 5, I'd probably say is better than the Mavs' third best player, which, depending on who you ask, is like P.J. Washington or Derek Lively. And Luka's a little banged up. So I said Celtics in 6 before the series starts. I still feel good about that prediction because the Mavs just don't look like they're as good as the Celtics, and the Celtics look very, very good. Shocker, the 64-18 team is good. I know that they had a cakewalk to the finals, but also they couldn't play anyone except the people who were in front of them, right? The Sixers couldn't beat the Knicks. The Knicks couldn't beat the Pacers, so they played the Pacers in the finals, or in the Eastern Conference Finals. They played the Heat round 1. Jimmy Butler got hurt. That's not their fault. They played the Cavs round 2. Donovan Mitchell got hurt. It's not their fault. It was a cakewalk to the finals, but they also earned that cakewalk. They won 64 games. You're supposed to have an easier path if you're the 1 seed. And it just happened to be an easier path than most 1 seeds get, I think it's probably the easiest finals path that I can remember, but also I'm 20. So I haven't been watching for that long relative to a lot of people. If you're 40, you've had the opportunity to see double the amount of basketball I've had the opportunity to see. And while that is true, they're also one of the best teams I've ever seen. They have the 3rd best net rating of all time, if I remember correctly, behind the 17 Warriors and the 96 Bulls. They play really well. They had a plus 17.6 net in the regular season, if I'm remembering that correctly, which is insane. They were just dominating teams, night in, night out. They had, I believe, the most 20-point leads in NBA history. They had just a lot going for them this season. They're an incredibly talented team with an incredible front office. And Joe Mazzulla, as much as he's funny to make fun of, I saw someone on Twitter, by the way, say that he speaks in wide receiver tweets, and I'm never going to be able to unsee that. I forget who it is, but if that was you, funny tweet. I doubt that person's watching, but that was a fantastic tweet. And it's just like, man, the Celtics are fucking good. The Celtics are really fucking good. They get in, they get out, and they show you what it's all about, just like the hokey pokey. And yeah, man, it was just incredible hoops from them. That's kind of all there is to it. Game 2 is on Monday, I believe. It might be on Sunday. I think it's on Sunday, actually. One of the two. Whichever one it is, Game 2 is an important one for both teams. Because if you're Dallas, you want to go back to Dallas tied 1-1. You don't want to be facing a 3-0 deficit, potentially, going into Game 3, right? Because, I don't know if I phrased that entirely correctly, but, you don't want to be potentially going into a 3-0 deficit after Game 3. If you're Boston, you want to take full advantage of home court. You want to take a commanding 2-0 lead. And they have choked in a couple of Game 2s this postseason. I believe it was Game 2 in the Miami series where Miami shot, 55% from beyond the arc or something. Game 2, they lost to the Cavs, and that was one of the games of all time. So if they're going to blow a game, it might be Game 2, as they have a history of doing. But, if you're Dallas, you try and get better looks for Kyrie, for Luka. You try and get Kyrie going a little earlier if you're asking me, right? You try and get him some easy looks, some layups, some easy pull-up mids, because the shots he was making were like pull-up mid-range shots. So get a couple of those going, run him off some screens, get some layups, back cuts, that sort of thing. Get him in rhythm. Hopefully he shoots better than 6 of 19 from the field. Luka, kind of do what you're doing with him. He has not gotten to the rim a ton this postseason, but outside of that, he's been very good, and the rim stuff is largely because of injury. I think he's only before Game 1, he had only shot 6% of his shots at the rim in the postseason. I don't know what that is now, but yeah, that's kind of the general gist of what you would try and do. You try and get P.J. Washington to shoot better, and you hope Derek Lively doesn't pick up 5 fouls in not many minutes, because he picked up a lot of fouls really quickly. And you don't want to have to play Gafford for that entire game. You want to be able to split minutes between them pretty evenly. So that's that. That's sort of the NBA Finals spiel I have. Overall, I think this playoffs has kind of been disappointing. And it's not just because my team lost in the second round. It is also partially because of that. But, Dallas and the Clippers was an underwhelming series. The Western Conference Finals was a very underwhelming series. The entire East was underwhelming outside of, I think, probably the 76ers-Knicks series, because that was a good series. I enjoyed watching that. But other than that one, I can't really name you a series I super loved watching, I was super engaged in. Because, the Pacers Game 1 was fun, yeah. But also, that was a sweep. Any series that the Celtics were involved in was not good. Pacers-Knicks was a decent series. But any, East Celtics series was not going to be good. The Celtics are just a lot better than every other team in the East. Out West, I think the Nuggets-Lakers series was probably not entertaining if you were a neutral fan. It was entertaining for me to some extent because, you had Jamal Murray going off like he did. You had, people... Well, Jamal Murray went off in the fourth quarters specifically. He sucked for the rest of that series. You had Michael Porter Jr. going off. But D'Lo was hot and cold for the Lakers. The Lakers in general were just not super great. The Nuggets won 4-1. It was the same script for 4 of those games. Just wasn't a great series probably for neutrals. Wolves-Suns was fun in the, oh shit, the Suns are dying sort of sense. But in terms of actual basketball, it wasn't fun to watch because that was a sweep that was not even close. And the Pelicans Thunder was the same thing. It was a sweep that wasn't even close. Zion was hurt. So, Pelicans never stood a chance. And then I already talked about it, but Mavs Clippers was underwhelming because Kawhi got hurt after playing 70 games in the regular season. I think Paul George got banged up a little bit in that series, maybe. I don't think he was playing healthy the entire time. I don't think he missed a game, but I don't remember him being healthy the entire series. Could be wrong there, though. Largely, the Clippers were just underwhelming. And I wonder what the Clippers do this offseason. Do they just run it back? Because you kind of have to run it back at this point, right? You don't probably let PG go for free. Because you gave up 7 first-round picks for him. You gave up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Letting him walk in free agency doesn't seem like the best decision. that you could do. But also, you probably don't want to pay him a max for 4 years, you know, and then have to amnesty clause him 2 years in. But, you know, Kawhi's already extended. Harden probably will come back, I'd assume. But Harden and Paul George are both free agents, so we'll see. You know, who knows? Because if both of them leave, Terrence Mann is suddenly your second best player. Probably Zubats, actually. But either way, one of those two is your second best player, and that's not good, especially when your best player is Kawhi Leonard and has knees that don't exist anymore. Let's see. So, yeah, the playoffs have been pretty underwhelming, I'd say, which sucks because I was really excited for these playoffs. I thought they were going to be good, but you know, it is what it is. And then onto the main portion of this video. Let's talk about 2024 draft prospects because I've been doing more scouting lately than I was for the rest of the cycle. And for those of you who don't know, I was a journalist for a long time. I might be again in the future, but a large portion of my job was doing draft coverage for a site called Denver Stiffs. It was the SB Nation site for Nuggets. It's still around, but you know, to a lesser extent than when it was with SB Nation, from my understanding. But you can still find all of my old work there that I did for the draft, and some on the Looney Bin, which is a site that was run by a couple of draft Twitter guys. They were very nice, but you know, I wrote a Jabari Smith Jr. article for them. But, you know, I used to do a good amount of draft stuff. That's the point of that whole introduction. And I was not probably going to do a ton of draft stuff for this cycle because this draft class sucks. Everyone's saying it. Everyone knows it. This draft class is not good. It's not great. You hope that it gets better, but you know, every draft class does end up producing at least one all-star most of the time. But I don't see who that all-star is going to be if it's not Alex Sarr. Because we're going to talk about the most overrated prospect in this draft, in my opinion, Zachary Risachet. Now, I'm going to make an entire video just on Zachary, so I'm not going to talk about it at too much length in this podcast, but I will give you the short version of my thoughts on him. I don't understand why he's being hyped up as a top 20 pick, let alone a top 3 pick. He is being talked about as a top 2 pick in this draft, and that is insane to me. Just ridiculous, because his entire thing is being a shooter, a sniper. And he didn't shoot like particularly great from 3. He shot, 39% on 4 attempts a game, basically, which isn't bad, but also like it's not super high volume. And he also had, I think, a 2 or 3 month stretch where he shot like 20% from 3. And then he had a 2 or 3 month stretch where he shot like 50% from 3. And then before that, I believe the highest shooting season he had percentage-wise from beyond the arc was like 35%. So he doesn't profile as an elite shooter, especially considering his free throw percentage is only 70%. He fouls a lot. He doesn't have a great like assist ratio, but he is a pretty good connective passer. You know, I'll give him that. He doesn't rebound particularly well. He doesn't score within the arc super well. And he has no self-creation to speak of. Literally none. Like, I have seen him make like his own self-created buckets. I could probably count on one hand the amount of times. That's a slight exaggeration, but you know, not too much. And I just don't see a world in which he's a star. I see a world in which he's like a worse shooting version of Michael Porter Jr., but less athletic. He had a 31-inch vertical at the draft. At 15, I had a 33-inch vertical, and I am a 5'6", 5'7" white guy who's not that athletic. Like, I'm not unathletic, mind you, but like I should have no business out jumping NBA athletes, because like Risachet, part of his appeal is that he's mobile, is that he's pretty switchable, is that he can keep up with guys on the perimeter, and vertical doesn't really have to do with that. But, if you want to get blocks or that sort of thing, you have to jump high. He just doesn't do that. He shot 61% of the rim this season, which is not bad, but he shot 55% on layups. He shot 80% on dunks, which for dunks, 80% is incredibly low. That is not high at all. And he just was not good at doing that, and it shows on tape. Like, if you watch him play, like, even the games where he has, like, 24, which I think he had one against Nanterre, I think is how you pronounce that. Sorry, I'm not French. But he had one against Nanterre, and, like, 3 weeks back, which he had 24 points on good efficiency, but it never felt like he was overwhelming in that game to me. And I just don't think he'll be overwhelming for defenses at the NBA level. And that is concerning if you're thinking about taking him with a top pick. Number one, if you're Atlanta, do you want to take a 6'10 guy who, like, sure, is a theoretically good shooter, but doesn't really do anything else outside of that? Is not an elite defender, is a fine defender, fine connective passer. Like a 6'10 guy who's not as athletic as John Collins was, not the lob threat that John Collins was, but is about as good of a shooter as John Collins was. Do you want John Collins minus the athleticism and, like, with a bit better defense? I wouldn't. And that's not my comp for him, right? But, like, you get my gist. So yeah, I'm not high on Zachary Reese-Shea in the slightest, but that is what it is. Then, you have Alex Sarr, who is good. He's good. I don't have much to add about Alex Sarr. I think he's really good. I think he's probably the best in this class. He might be a decent shooter one day, but mostly he's a defensive prospect who is a good finisher around the rim. And yeah, that's his deal. Reed Shepherd is good. I don't know how I feel about him at, like, 3, which is what Tankathon has right now. I don't think I would do that. Well, Houston's a bit weird because you take Reed Shepherd and he can be your Fred VanVleet in, like, a year or two once you get off that contract. But also, Fred VanVleet is Fred VanVleet is a really good player. But also Reed Shepherd, it's just not an exciting use of a top 3 pick, But he's good. Like, he's solid to above average at everything. And he's a very good shooter. Like, very, very good shooter. So, I don't have any qualms about Reed at 3, I guess. But also, I personally wouldn't have him that high because I feel like my philosophy with that sort of thing, right, is that you take stars. You try and take the dudes with highest upside if you're picking that high. I know Houston is, like, somewhat ready to compete, but also you still want to take players that have, like, very boom potential, right? And to me, Reed just doesn't project to have that. I could be wrong. I could be incredibly wrong. All of these I could be wrong on. I am not perfect. I never claimed to be. No one is perfect at the draft. The draft is an educated crapshoot. But also, this is my thoughts after watching film, right? I have watched a good amount of film this year. Reed is, like, good at a lot of things. I just don't think he's going to be a star because he's not great at many things. He's great at shooting. But outside of that, he doesn't have ways to really leverage that super well. But he can play on or off ball, which is good when you have Amen Thompson, who you probably try and shift into being a ball handler soon. But he also could take pressure off of Amen or Fred or whoever you're playing him with. So I don't hate that pick. I think Houston is a good area to develop for a lot of players. I think Zachary Reese-Shea would be good. I think Houston would be good for Reese-Shea. I just don't think Reese-Shea would be good for them because I don't think you really want to double dip on, like, the Jabari Smith Jr. Archetype of prospect, at least on offense. But I do think Reese-Shea, when you think about, like, an MPJ role or a Jabari Smith role, those people work best in heliocentric offenses or DHO offenses. And while Houston is not heliocentric in the conventional sense, they do a lot of DHO stuff with Good. And soon enough, they might have some heliocentrism going on there, right? Whether it be Jalen Green or Amon Thompson, they might start running stuff through them more, and then that would give you the opportunity to run Reese Shea off screens on the opposite side of the ball, or stuff like that. Matas Buzelis is also not really good in my opinion. He just doesn't do a ton great, and he is not projected to shoot well. He shot 26% in the G League, 45% from the field, 69% from the line, so not many good indicators there. He did have good stock numbers for someone his age in the G League. He averaged about 3 stocks a game. Stocks, by the way, is just steals and blocks combined into one stat. He averaged like 14 points a game on 31 minutes a game, and like that's not bad. But it is underwhelming for what you wanted to see from him coming into this year, because he was a good shooter at the high school level for like the last year he was there. But also he wasn't a good shooter any year before that in high school. So I think that was more of a blip on the radar sort of thing. And he is 6'10 with a 6'10 wingspan, so a neutral wingspan. Has a good standing reach at 8'9.5". He has a 38 max vert, so like he's more athletic than Reese Shea. I could see someone preferring him over Reese Shea, but I don't like either of them really. And if the Pistons took him, like they have him going there on the Tankathon, that would be a bad pick for the Pistons. IMO. Topic is good, but also he has red flags. He is 6'6" with a 6'5.5" wingspan, which isn't small height wise, but wingspan wise that's pretty small. And it was reported apparently that he had a 7-foot wingspan, but anyone who watched tape could tell you that was not a 7-foot wingspan. And he shot 30.6% from 3-on-4 attempts a game nearly, which is like not good, right? Obviously. But also he shot 88% from the line. So there's indicators of touch there. There's indicators of shooting touch, and I do buy into that long term with him. I think he'll end up being like a 35% shooter. I don't think he'll be great, but I do think he'll be better than he was in the Euros. And he's a great slasher, very good finisher around the rim, shot 70% there, give or take from what I remember. And while he's not a dunker, really, he is a very good craft finisher around the rim. But the thing is, he tore his ACL. So that's not great if you're trying to draft for the now. But I do think the Spurs, who they have Topic going to on Tankathon, is a good place for him to end up at, because there's not pressure to be good immediately. So they can afford to kind of wait this one out, right? They can kind of afford to go with the flow on this one, and I think that that'll do them well. Let's see. Ron Holland is rumored to fall out of the lottery, potentially. That would be stupid. That would be the biggest draft slide I've seen since Maxey. Like the stupidest one. He would probably be second on my board. He's not a great shooter. Shot 24% in the G League from there, but 73% from the line. And I think he'll be like an Aaron Gordon level shooter, right? Which isn't great, but it is not a non-shooter per se. But he also averaged 3.5 stocks a game in 32 minutes against, adults in the G League, which is good. He averaged 19.5 points, which is good. He has a 30-inch vertical, which is good. He has a 6'11 wingspan at 6'8", which is good. He shot 56% true shooting, 46% overall. He was really good slashing. He's good from the mid-range. He's good, he's mainly good as a dunker, but I think he can do some self-creation stuff. I think he's probably the best bet for star potential in this draft, even ahead of Sarr. I think Sarr has a higher floor, but a little bit lower of a ceiling. I think Ron has a higher chance of reaching his ceiling than Sarr does, but also I think he has a chance to bottom out more than Sarr does. So that's why I have Sarr above him probably on my board. But, he's good. I understand why you wouldn't take him top 3, but also I would have him second on my board. Dalton Connect. He is 23 and a half years old on draft night, or 23 and like a quarter year old. He was born April 19th, 2001. He averaged a lot of points. He was very good from beyond the arc at Tennessee this past year. He was a fifth-year senior, though. He is older than Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball. He is only a little younger than James Wiseman. And these players were drafted in 2020. It is 2024. You are drafting a 23-year-old if you are doing this, and I don't love drafting a 23-year-old personally. That's just not something I'm super keen on. And he is not really a good rebounder, and he's not like a super plus defensive player. He's not a bad defensive player, but he's not very super high either on that end for me. But, you know, I project him to be pretty good, three-point shooter. Like, he'll be a good role player, but also we've seen the Buddy Hields not work out super great, the Chris Duartes not work out super great in the league, and those are older players, you know, and like Buddy Hield has been a good NBA player at times, but is not the all-star that you would want him to be at a top 10 pick, right? And I know this is a weaker draft, and I know all that stuff, but as a top 10 pick, you're still trying to look for talent that could be a potential all-star, because you are trying to draft for star talent if you are a top 10 team. Stefan Castle has been telling teams that he only wants to go places where he could be the one, where he could be the point guard. Not a good shooter, pretty good slasher, shot well at the rim. Not a doesn't have fantastic like assist stats, but is a better passer than stats would indicate. Pretty good defender, you know, pretty big for a point guard. He's 6'6", 0.75 with a 6'9" wingspan, which is very good. But I think he measured at 6'5" without shoes at the combine. But, you know, 6'9" wingspan, 8'6" standing reach, 37% vertical, or 37-inch vertical. He looked good in the tournament. I would anticipate him going pretty high, but also the needs to be a point guard stuff throws me off a little bit, because like I don't know if I buy him super long term as like a franchise point guard. I think he could be very good for someone. I just don't know if that's as a point guard. Rob Dillingham has been falling, and it's largely just due to his frame, I think. He measured in at 6'1" without shoes and was 165, I want to say, which is very skinny. That's around what I weigh, and I am 5'6", 5'7", somewhere in that zone. He is, give or take, 8 inches taller than me, which is not fantastic if you're, you know, an NBA player. But also, he has an elite handle. He shot very well from 3. He shot 44% on 4.5 attempts a game. He passed the ball well. He was a very good player for Kentucky. Should have been coming as a starter. He projects very well as a shooter. He projects to be a very good offensive player. Defense, you can have questions there. He's not great on that end, but I also don't think he'll be the worst player on that end either. I think eventually he'll figure out ways to be somewhat impactful there. And, you know, we'll see where he goes. But I would probably have him... I'd have him in the same tier as Ron Holland for me. You know, that 2 to 4 area. I don't know exactly where I have him, because I haven't made an official big board yet. I haven't typed out everyone's names and tried to get them all my ducks in a row there. But he's very good. Elite handle. He has an elite skill, which not many players in this draft do. And elite skills are important when you're trying to project out who's going to be good at what. Who's going to be good at X. Who's going to be very good at Y. But yeah, he was very efficient. Had a great three-point attempt rate, high volume, high percentage. Yeah, it's just that he's small. That's why he's falling from what I'm aware. He should not be falling as much as he is on mock drafts. Jacoby Walter, is not good. He is from Baylor, 6'5.5", 200 pounds. Not a bad frame, but also Was not efficient, didn't shoot well, and for someone hyped up as a shooter, not good. He's a supposed shooter. He's the Ronald Reagan shooter, right? For those unaware, Ronald Reagan was shot once, but they didn't kill him. So, missed the shot. That's what that means. But he had a very high 3-point rate. He shot more threes than he did 2-pointers, which is a choice when you're shooting 34% from them. He had a 54% true shooting, which for someone taking 6.5 3-point attempts a game, it's not great. He shot 37.6% from the field, which is awful. 34.1% from three, which is below average. Shot 79% from the free throw line, which is good, but for a guard, that's not remarkable. Average 14.5, 4, and 1.5. So he's not really a shot creator. He is good defensively, but not elite defensively. He is inefficient. I just don't see why people are projecting him lottery, let alone first round. I really don't get the lottery stuff, but I probably wouldn't even have him in my first round. But I do see a path where he's decent. I just don't think he will be good. Kyle Filipowski is not good. He just okay. I have been citing stats for a lot of this, but look me dead in the eyes. This man just does not have aura. He gets pushed around. Sure, he can defend at a college level. I don't believe in him long term. He does not have aura. That is my entire thing I'm saying on him. I am saying no more. He doesn't have aura. Anyway, on to the next player. Jared McCain. Jared McCain, really like him. He projects kind of to be like a Seth Curry type. He didn't do too much ball handling at Duke, but, he did a lot of stuff in high school and was, pretty solid as a secondary when given the opportunity at Duke. He's probably my bet for the best shooter in the class. Shot 41.4% on 6 attempts a game, which is a 55% three-point attempt rate, which is like Jacoby Walter, but a good shooter, an elite shooter. He had a 61.1 true shooting percentage, and he was just incredible as far as shooting goes. He held up defensively pretty well at the college level, and I project that will be the same at the NBA level. I don't see a reason why he would be poor defensively. He's not the bounciest guy, only has a 33-inch vertical, but for a 6'3 guard, that's not really going to be trying to finish around the rim a ton, or above the rim, rather. That's not the biggest deal in the world. He's quick enough, and while he has a short wingspan, you're not drafting him to be a defensive specialist, you're drafting him to be a shooter, and he can do that very, very well. Isaiah Collier is someone who people either tend to love or hate, and I don't know exactly where I land with him because I have not watched enough film on him to confidently tell you where I would have him ranked, but I watched a ton of his high school tape, and I've watched a decent amount of his USC tape, but take what I say about him with a pinch of salt, but he turns the ball over a ton. He does not have a three-point shooter, or a three-point shot really to speak of. For someone trying to get downhill most of the time and finish around the rim, above the rim, 34-inch vertical is not great. He shot 33.8% on 3 attempts a game, so low volume, fairly low percentage. He had 4 assists a game to 3 turnovers a game, which is a bad assist-to-turnover ratio. But he does have upside in the fact that there were games where he played very well. It's just towards the end and the middle of the season, he didn't do well, and he's probably the most disappointing prospect from high school to college, I'd say, this year, because I had him first in this class going into this year, just based off his high school tape, and that did not hold up. He also only has a 6'5" wingspan, and it's not great defensively. So like you're drafting him as a raw project, but also I don't hate drafting him in like the late teens. You know, if the Raptors wanted to take him, I think that makes a lot of sense for them. Devin Carter is someone who people who I respect are high on. I have not watched a ton of his tape. Basically, though, he's like a 6'2" guard with a 6'9" wingspan, give or take. He does a lot of the little things well. He is older. He's on the older side of things. He's almost 23. He's 22 and a quarter or so at the time of the draft. But he does have a 42-inch vertical, a 2.87 3/4 sprint, which is fast. He has a very good wingspan. So he measures really well as far as, you know, like athleticism and stuff. It's just his height is kind of what puts people off there. He shot 37.7% on 7 3-point attempts a game this year, which is very good. He averaged almost 9 rebounds a game, which is absurd for someone that height. You know, that's like Josh Hart-esque. And he averaged 3 stocks a game as a guard. So he is someone who projects to be very good defensively if the height is not a problem for him. If he ends up on the Heat, he's going to be an all-NBA player. Outside of that, he will be a very good role player. I think he's one of the safer picks in this draft. I think he is someone who people could look at and be like, that is a good role player. And there's not a ton of people you can guarantee will be good role players in this draft. I think you can basically guarantee Devin Carter will at least be a serviceable role player in this draft. So for that reason, I think he's probably someone I'd consider lottery. Like if the Nuggets trade in, by the way, real quick plug. I am going to do a mailbag once a week on my Substack, link in the description. I'll also answer some questions on here. You can specify whether it's for the podcast or for the mailbag in the email if you'd like. Email is Asher Levy, just as you spell it on the title or on the channel name, mailbag@gmail.com. Send your stuff there. I answer questions on my Substack once a week. And this week I got asked if the Nuggets traded into the lottery, who would I pick? I said Jared McCain, but Devin Carter was second in that for me. I think Devin Carter was very good. I would take him lottery. But, you know, that's kind of that. And then outside of that, I don't like Zach Edey. I don't think he's going to be good. People think he's going to be good, and I understand the thought process there, but also I don't think he'll be good. And then we get into the range where we can start talking about guys who I think the Nuggets should draft, and that's a good transition into Nuggets talk. So let's talk Nuggets, right? Calvin Booth had a little too much dip on his chip this offseason, or last offseason, rather. Because using 3 roster spots for rookies, and 2 of them being second-round picks who were like 23 and 24 at the time of the draft, if I remember correctly, is absurd. Giving both of those players not two-way deals, but standard 4-year contracts and guaranteeing them roster spots and money is ridiculous. He should not have done that. Like, Jalen Pickett had trouble bringing the ball up the court. Hunter Tyson barely got on the court. You know, like Colin Gillespie was getting picked over Jalen Pickett, and that tells you something because Colin Gillespie is a two-way player, on a two-way contract player, and so that's 3 roster spots right there, right? Then you had Peyton Watson and Christian Braun, who are both young players who had flashes. Christian Braun is just straight up good. Peyton Watson will be very good, I think. I'm high on Peyton Watson long term. Right now, the offense is very rough. He didn't play in the Timberwolves series much because of that. And largely just because he played a lot during the regular season. And people are trying to say that Malone didn't play the young players for some reason. He played the young guys that deserved to get tick. He played Peyton Watson. He played Christian Braun. When Julian Strawther was healthy, he played Julian Strawther. And by the time Julian Strawther got back, the rotation was basically set, right? But we saw in the playoffs, Peyton Watson and Christian Braun couldn't really play together because neither of them are good offensively. Both are very, 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 very good defensively. I think both of them have all defensive sort of potential in them. I don't know if they make it during their careers, but I think both of them could be that level of defender. But at the same time, it's untenable to have both of them on the court in the playoffs. Now, if one of them really takes a leap offensively, that's great. I think you probably keep both of them, unless a very good trade for like an Alex Caruso comes along, or something of that, something of that caliber where you feel comfortable trading one of them for a win-now piece. I think you probably keep both of them because the idea behind what Calvin Booth is doing is a good one, right? You want to stay under the second apron as much as you can with the new CBA because you want to be able to trade your picks. You want to be able to aggregate salaries. You want to be able to, have some amount of roster flexibility, which basically the second apron takes all roster flexibility away from you. But you also want to have win now players when you have the best player in the world on your team. You want to give Michael Malone people who he will work with, who he trusts, right? Because he did not trust the bench at all during the regular season. So he played the starters an absurd amount of minutes, and I can't blame him for that. Because do you want to get outscored by 20 every time Jokic subs off for 5 minutes? Do you want to have the starters be the best 5-man unit in basketball? Do you want to have to come back from 20 down every time that Jokic goes off? You don't. And Calvin Booth did not give him the proper tools to do that, in my opinion. So back to the roster spots, right? So that's 5 roster spots between the rookies and the sophomores. Vlatko Čančar was injured the entire season, so that's a 6th roster spot. And Zeke Naji, while given a $32 million extension over 4 years, which he did nothing to earn at the NBA level, he played, I think, probably 80 games over his first 3 years or something like that. You really hoped that he was going to be something this year. He did not pan out. Now that is a contract that they are probably going to have to move picks to get off of. And he didn't end up playing at all. So that's 7 wasted roster spots. And then DeAndre Jordan is also on the roster. And I have no issue with rostering DeAndre Jordan. He's a great locker room guy. He's a leader in the locker room. He is a great teammate. He's someone you want around the team. But also he's sort of the team's Udonis Haslem, where you don't want to have to play him. And he outplayed Zeke Naji this year. So that is saying something that DeAndre Jordan, who was washed 4 years ago, is outplaying Zeke Naji. And that is 8 roster spots. So as the 7 not wasted roster spots, you have the starting 5, Reggie Jackson and Justin Holiday. Reggie Jackson and Justin Holiday are not great. Reggie Jackson did well subbing in for Murray for the first little while, but then eventually he, got run down. His legs kind of gave out. He's 34, I think. You probably don't want him playing heavy minutes for all 82 games, which is exactly what he did. And then by the time the playoffs ran around, he did not have his legs under him, and he was not good. So they couldn't play him in the playoffs much, and he was their second best ball handler, which is a problem. That brings me to my second point. They need better bench creation. They need, because the starting 5, I really, really hope that they bring KCP back, because this team is not winning a title without KCP, to me, right? Unless they make a move on them to get a Caruso type, like I said. If they just run it back with Christian Brown as the starter, I don't think that this is a title team. A large part of why they won last year is KCP. A large reason for why they were so good this year, in the regular season, was KCP. His shooting is elite. His defense is elite. He's the perfect 5th starter. If you lose that, you lose a lot. So assuming that the starting 5 is back, right? You are left with a bench of Reggie Jackson, assuming he picks up his player option, Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Vlatko Čančar, and Zeke Naji. So you want to upgrade, right? Around this area in the draft, you are looking at the 2 most common people mocked around this range that I would love to have if I'm the Nuggets is Daron Holmes and Bub Carrington. Daron Holmes is out of Dayton, and he received a promise from an NBA team, and he's been mocked to the Nuggets a lot. Do what you will with that information. but I believe Gavoni had him going 28 to the Nuggets. Tankathon has him going 28 to the Nuggets. I believe the Yahoo one had him going 28 to the Nuggets. The Bleacher Report had him going 28 to the Nuggets. So the Nuggets are probably interested in him. You don't end up being mocked a player like across the board without some people putting out, hey, we like this guy. He is kind of I think he would fit perfectly in Denver because he can do on-ball stuff, but also he's a good roll man, which the Nuggets have not had for a long, long time. He could do some playmaking stuff, which the Nuggets have not had since Mason Plumlee, probably. He is someone who can do stuff off the dribble himself. He can play finish. He's a really good defender. He can shoot. He is exactly what the Nuggets need, a great bench big. And I don't know why he's mocked as low as he is. I have him top 10 in the draft. He's older, but also if you're the Nuggets, that's fine. You're just looking for people who can contribute. And I think he has a all-star-ish ceiling. I think his ceiling is like a Pascal Siakam light. I think he could be an 18, 10, and 5 guy, and good efficiency, which is a pretty good player. Fringe all-star level player. I also love Bub Carrington if they decide to go guard in the draft and sign him big in free agency, because he has so much juice on-ball creation, and that's exactly what the Nuggets need. He would allow Jamal Murray to play off ball. He can play off ball a little bit. I think you would prefer him to be an on-ball creator, but he's comfortable enough shooting off ball. He is someone who holds up enough defensively. He's 6'5". He's 200 pounds or so, but he's young, so I feel like he can grow into that. He is light though, so he probably gets bumped and that sort of thing. He only shot 32% from 3 on 6 attempts a game, but also he shot 79% from the line, which, as I mentioned with Jacoby Walter, is not excellent, but it's not bad either. His 3-point volume though is encouraging to me. He has more pull-up juice than Jacoby Walter does. He has stuff in the mid-range that I like a lot, and he finished around the rim well enough from what I've seen. He operates pick and roll really well, and also Pitt, where he went to school, does a lot of DHO stuff, and I think he would know how to play with Jokic right off rip. So that's why I am very in on those two players. Those are two players that I feel like they could address needs of the Nuggets immediately. I feel like they could play in their rookie year, and I feel like they also are a good long-term pick. And if you get either of those at 28, the rest of the league messed up. I have both of them in my top 10. But, if you look to free agency, if you're the Nuggets, you're looking at KCP. You hope he resigns. I would give him up to probably $25 million a year. I would give him 3 years, $75. He's very well coveted around the league. Tons of teams want him. Basically, any team with cap space wants him. The Sixers, the Magic, the Spurs, I've all heard are interested in him. You're going to have to pay him. You're going to have to pay him a good amount of money. And I hope the owners do not cheap out on that. They have done well so far in not cheaping out during this core. Historically speaking, they are pretty cheap, but also they have given Michael Malone a new contract. They've given Calvin Booth a new contract. They've signed Nikola Jokic to a max. They've signed Michael Porter to a max. They've signed Jamal Murray to a max. They paid Aaron Gordon $22 million a year, which at the time was seen as an overpay, but they paid him. They extended KCP. They have done basically everything that they should have done up until this point, and I feel pretty good about them spending money, unless I'm proven otherwise this season. Which they might try and frame it as hey, we're trying to stay under the second apron. This was a team building move, which I don't like using that excuse. I don't like that excuse. I don't want them to have that excuse, because that is an excuse to me. This team is not nearly what it is without KCP. They know that. The front office knows that. The players know that. Everyone knows that. And if they lose him, let him walk. Don't at least match the offer. It's one thing if Jeremy Grants it, right? If you give him the same contract that someone else is giving him, and he just chooses to go somewhere else for whatever reason. That's one thing. I couldn't fault them for that. But if they don't match the contract, that's an entirely different thing, and my entire read on them as owners shifts. It changes drastically. And then you try and sign a backup big, if you don't draft Day'Ron. Even if you do draft Day'Ron, you probably want to bring in a backup big, assuming you trade Zeke Nnaji. Because, like, if Day'Ron isn't good enough and Malone doesn't trust him, you want to give a veteran option. You know, you want to give Malone people he can trust. That's the entire point of, like, not being as young as you are. And also, you probably want to move off Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson. It's not going to happen, but you probably want to do that because they have they're wastes of roster spots, in my opinion. They were good in the G League, but that's all they will be, in my opinion, is good G League players. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, you know, they're great in 2 years' time, but I heavily doubt it. Yeah, so we're running about 55 minutes. I think that's a good place to call it. If you guys liked this, leave a comment, like, all that, sub. Yeah, thank you for watching the first episode of this. I will be back next Saturday. I plan on. Yeah, bye.